Well, hi guys, it's that time. It's our Bible teaching snippet of the day. Well, today I'm going to set off on a very challenging task. I am going to try for the very first time to do a teaching on the parable of the rich man and Lazarus, okay? I've never tried to teach it privately or record it and post it publicly, okay? I have notes and notes of hours of study on this, but I've not taken my notes and tried to formulate it into a teaching. So that's going to be a little bit of a challenge for me. Now, I did say it was a parable, so let me just say that on the front end. This is not a true story about two people. This is a parable. It is an analogy that Jesus used to illustrate a deeper truth within a story, okay? So, sometimes I'll use analogies to get a point across every once in a while. So Jesus was just using an analogy to teach a deeper truth and bring clarity to what he was trying to teach. Maybe not to us today, but to the people that day that were listening to him, okay? And that's another thing. We'll play Snatch a Verse, and we just snatch verses and twist them and make them fit. And what we're doing is we're playing Snatch a Verse to try to prove what we already believe is true. So we will put words in the Bible and in the mouth of Jesus to prove what we already believe. And instead of letting Jesus say what Jesus says, we will change what he said to make it mean what we need it to mean. And in this parable, that's what has happened in the American churches. This parable is used by the American churches primarily. Did you know the Eastern Orthodox Church has never even believed any of this crazy mess that we teach in our denominations in America? They understood and still do understand what Jesus was teaching in this parable. Unfortunately, we have manipulated it and twisted it, pulled things out of context, so we can prove what we believe is true. So hopefully what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it in context, and I'm going to untwist it. And as I untwist this scripture, and we get a little clearer on what Jesus was actually saying here in the Bible, maybe we will get some junk out of our trunk and make room for some truth, okay? So let me start here and say this. I was just teaching out of Luke chapter 15 about the lost lamb, the lost coin, and the lost son. This parable about Lazarus and the rich man, it is actually tucked into one long parable, and Jesus made 5 different points within this one long parable. And I can just tell you, starting in chapter 15, Jesus taught, like I said, about the lost lamb, the lost coin, the lost son, and the unrighteous steward. And then we see him teaching about the rich man and Lazarus. And what do I mean by that? When Jesus started teaching, he did not stop and leave town and then pick up with a different group of people. He didn't go home that night and come back to that same town the next day and start teaching again. No, if you read Scripture, Jesus starts talking to a group of people in chapter 14, verse 1, okay? And he continues talking to these exact same people, these scribes and Pharisees and sinners, this crowd, and his disciples. All of these people, it's the same crowd from chapter 14 all the way through all of these parables. So let me talk real quick about where Jesus started when he was teaching. Oh, my iPad cut off. Let me get that back on real quick. Okay, now I'm back up. Let me read to you in Luke chapter 14, verse 1, just to show you where these teachings that just go on and on and on and on, where Jesus doesn't stop. He's talking to the same people, making these analogies and making these points with deeper truths about some things, okay? Let me read this to you. And it says here, "And it came to pass that Jesus went into the house of one of the chief Pharisees to eat bread on the Sabbath day, and they watched Jesus." Okay. Right here, and the heading here says Jesus heals a man on the Sabbath. So this starts with Jesus being watched by the Pharisees, and he heals a man on the Sabbath. And they have this discourse about whether or not it's lawful for Jesus to be healing on the Sabbath. They're always questioning him and trying to start problems with him. Because in verse 3 it says, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath? Let me go ahead and stop in this video and say this. Yes, it was lawful for Jesus to heal anybody on the Sabbath who was sick, okay? The reason they didn't know if it was lawful is because over time they had added men's doctrines, rituals, traditions into their Jewish religious system. The religious leaders added extra rules, regulations, and rituals into Judaism, and the leaders expected Jesus to follow their rules. Jesus was following what was required of him in Scripture through the Mosaic laws, not the rules and regulations and rituals put in place by religious men who added to what God had already put in place, okay? Now, let me give you an analogy, speaking of parables and analogies, okay? See, me as a born-again believer, a Jesus follower, I am to love the Lord my God with all my heart, all my soul, all my mind, put God first in my life, and follow Jesus, right? The second thing I'm supposed to do is love my neighbor the way Jesus loved them. Now, it says love your neighbor as yourself, but then Jesus raised the bar and says, no, I tell you what, instead of loving them like you love yourself, love them the way that I have loved you, which is self-sacrificing, others-centered type of love. Put them first. Put them in front of you. So now I don't have to say to myself, well, how would I want that person to treat me? No, I've got to say, how would Jesus treat this person? That's what is required of me now as a New Testament believer. But now watch. But I'm a part of a religious system, right? So now the church I go to, they have their bylaws. And in their bylaws, it says that I have to be at church at 10 a.m. if I want to be in right standing with the church. I have to give the church 10% of my income to be right with their religious system and the leaders of the church. And let's just say I'm a man and my name is Bob. Did you know their bylaws say that Bob cannot be in leadership unless he is clean shaven? So see, that's not Scripture. That's man-made rituals, rules, and traditions, right? And that's what the Pharisees was trying to make Jesus conform to. It wasn't a question of whether Jesus was sinning and breaking the Mosaic law. It was a question of, is Jesus submitting to our religious system and doing what we say people have to do? I pray that has blessed you today. Now, so we see in chapter 14 is where this discourse starts happening, and Jesus just goes on and on and on all the way through. It's 5 parables within one whole parable, okay, one big parable. For the rest of my time today, what I want to do here from this point is I just want to take us over to chapter 16, and I want to read verse 23 and set a foundation of where we get this eternal, ongoing place of torment, of conscious punishment, a place called hell. And from here, and so I'll do this today, and then I'll pick up and go a little bit deeper tomorrow. But let's start here in verse 23. And I'm in the King James Bible. It says, and in hell he, the rich man, lifted up his eyes, being in torment. Now this one verse is where we get the concept out of this parable that the rich man is in hell, burning in a lake of fire, in conscious, forever ongoing torment, because it's right here in our Bible, right? The word hell, it's right there. Well, I want to talk about that word hell in this verse here. There are there's 4 words that was translated as the one word hell in the King James Bible. In the Old Testament, there was the word Sheol, meaning the grave or the place of the dead. Sheol means the grave or the place of the dead, okay? In the New Testament, there's 3 words that was translated to mean one word, hell. You have the word well, let me look it up. You have the word Hades, number 86, and it is used 11 times. We have the word Gehenna, which is the valley of Hinnom, and this is a burning garbage dump. It's a valley where they burn garbage and threw dead bodies of animals to keep disease and sickness from spreading. That word Gehenna is number 1067, and it was used 12 times in the New Testament, but it was always translated as hell. And then we have Tartarus, number 5020. It was used one time and one time only, and it is found in 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 4. That word Tartarus was also translated as the word hell. So we've got Hades 11 times, Gehenna 12 times, and Tartarus 1 time. And all of those was translated as the word hell. And then we have 65 times in the Old Testament the word Sheol was translated as hell. That number is in the Old Testament is 7585 Sheol, and it's in there 65 times. So what we have is this doctrine formed through 4 words that's been translated and changed, okay? That wasn't always in our Bibles. When we got the King James Bible translated into English, now we have a new word called hell inserted into Scripture and a brand new doctrine added into the church, a place of eternal torment, ongoing punishment for people who are rejected by God, okay? Now, before I let you go, I'm going to talk about the word here in Scripture in verse 23, chapter 16 of Luke, verse 23, and in hell. That is number 86, and that is the word Hades. And like I said, the word Hades is found 11 times total in the New Testament. Now, 10 of those times it was translated hell, and I want to correct myself if I said it wrong earlier. It's used 11 times total in the New Testament, the word Hades, okay? And 10 of the 11 times it was translated as hell. What it actually means is the same word as Sheol in the Old Testament, which means the grave or the place of the dead. I'm going to read it to you in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 55. You ready? It says, O death, where is thy sting? O grave, where is thy victory? That one time, the translators translated it appropriately as the word grave or place of the dead, right? Death, where is your sting? O grave, where is your victory? The other 10 times, it was translated as the word hell. So I will tell you what I'll do. I'll take a picture and I'm going to post exactly where all 11 of these are, and you can go ahead and study that tonight and look at it and see what you think about the word of hell being in there, and replace it with the word grave or the place of the dead and see how that fits into Scripture all 11 times. Is that fair enough? So I tell you what, I'm going to go ahead and call this a wrap-up today, but tomorrow I'm going to start digging and showing you some very, very important things that the church needs to know and understand about this parable of the rich man and Lazarus, so that we can get the junk out of the trunk and make room for truth. Okay? I love you guys, and I will see you here tomorrow. Bye-bye.